Hello and welcome to The Stack. This week is a bit of a bookshop special here on the show. I visited Lala Books in London's Camberwell, Climax Books both in New York and London, and a newcomer to Lisbon's bookshop scene. And Christoph Amend, editorial director of Zeit, on a new special supplement for his paper, Die Zeit. Enjoy the show. From Midori House in London, this is The Stack, 30 minutes of print industry analysis, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start the show in Portugal. Monocle's May issue, which is out now, gave away 50 design awards. And for Best Bookshop, the winner was Good Company Bookshop in Lisbon. The shop is owned by my fellow Brazilian Giovanna Centeno and her partner Samuel Miller. It was a pleasure talking to both about their bookstore, the exciting publishing scene in Lisbon, and more.
My connection to the city goes a long way, actually. My great-grandfather was Portuguese, so Portuguese culture has always been in my family. I've always been drawn to Portugal a lot. I moved there permanently in 2019, and I just fell in love completely. I never wanted to live anywhere else, and I was working in publishing in the U.S. at the time. I basically had to make a decision. Either I was going to try to stick it out as a freelancer, which wasn't working very well for me, or I was going to have to move to the U.S. to further my career. And that's basically when me and Samuel really started to think seriously about Good Company. We wanted to create a place that we felt was missing in the city, which was a third space, was a place where people from all languages, all walks of life could connect through literature and good coffee and good wine and good company. And so, we just wanted to really build roots there. In Lisbon, I think, is the perfect city to build roots in. Portugal is a very welcoming culture, welcoming to families. I just always felt very connected. The language is my mother tongue as well, so that also really helped.
Our mother tongue, I love that.
Mother tongue,
I love that. What about you, Samuel? You are from the US, right? How do you enjoy Lisbon as well? Is this a city? Because I do have this sense that Lisbon these days, it feels like a city that is connecting people. It's becoming very international, but still with this kind of sense of community very much alive that maybe you don't see in the larger cities, perhaps.
Yeah, that's very true. I think Lisbon's a village. It's one of the few capital cities, I think, in Europe where you can bump into people still that you know just on the daily walk. And especially after COVID, I think a lot of people moved here, to work remotely or as expats. There's lots of business moving here as well. So it's a really interesting time to live in Lisbon, I think.
I completely agree. Giovanna, what about you when you were younger, perhaps, back in Brazil? Did you always have an idea to have a bookstore, perhaps, in the future? Because some people, they have those dreams, right?
Yes, definitely. And I mean, my connection to books and literature and book selling has always been very strong in my life since a very young age. I often refer to one of the booksellers in my town, my city, Belém, Deborah, and I say that she raised me because she truly did. She saw me as a very small child up until very recently when she unfortunately had to close her bookstore. But she was one of the fundamental people in my life to try to give me books that I think expanded my worldview, built me as a reader. And so I always understood the importance of book selling in a community. The bookseller is very much, I would say, a tastemaker and also a beacon. Bookselling can connect people to different ideas, to what's happening around the world. And I think when it comes to the publishing industry, it's not often talked about that booksellers are really the unsung heroes, They are the ones that connect the consumer, the readers. They are the ones that make the readers from the ground up. And so I always admired bookselling. At first, I don't think it was going to be my career, but it's such a perfect fit for me. I've always loved books. I was working in publishing. Bookselling is a dream to me, truly. It's a dream come true.
That's fantastic. And Samuel, for those, I love Lisbon, so I will be paying a visit to your shop very soon. I wonder if you could give us a sense of the space, because from what I can see in pictures, it looks very cozy. I mean, you've mentioned there is a cafe, there is a wine bar for later. But tell us perhaps a bit more about the location, about the space itself.
Yeah, so the space was absolutely a top priority for us when we were putting this together. We didn't just want to have some bookshelves and a chair. We invested heavily in the design and the materials. We worked with Studio Pim, which is a local design studio, done quite a few restaurants and commercial spaces in the city. We're located in Campo Pequeno, near the bullfighting stadium. So it's a really interesting neighborhood because it's a great mix of business and sort of middle class, upper middle class families. And we're on near one of the main avenues also. So there's a lot of through traffic. So in terms of a community, we get a little bit of everything here. It's not like one of the main tourist hotspots. There's still actual urban life here. It's not just a destination for people. So over half of our customers, I would say at this point, are locals and regulars, and about 50% are Portuguese as well, which is really, really special for us and something we've really worked hard to maintain and build.
And that's very special because, Portugal is going through so much change. And some people saying, but what about the locals as well? So it's good that has been mentioned. What about, it is kind of an English bookstore as well, which I think perhaps that, Lisbon needed that because, as I said, it's becoming quite international. So tell us a bit more about the selection of the titles you're having. How do you decide? Are there any local authors as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We have local authors. We are an English bookstore. We only sell books in English. But one thing that I specifically always wanted in our curation was to have Lusophone authors, not only Portuguese, but from Africa, from Brazil, from Macau, Goa. And so it was always very important to me to make this connection, this cultural connection, because English bookstores, and I think specifically now in the way that Lisbon is growing as a city, as a cosmopolitan city, can be seen as something that is not made for locals, but that's really not the case. A majority of our customers, I would say now, are Portuguese people. Portuguese people crave to read in English specifically because the publishing industry in Portugal sometimes can become very pricey with translations and other things like that. And it's just a different way to get titles from around the world faster because translations in English are more widely available, even in other languages. But in terms of the Lusophone authors and local authors, definitely. We are trying to partner more and more with contemporary local authors, people who are up and coming and craving this connection with a wide range of readers and maybe trying to get more translations out there. We are building our events calendar, very, very focused on that. We want to be a hub. Not only, I'm going to visit Lisbon, where should I go? But we want it to be a community hub. We want to
events as well?
We have several events, and we want to have more events with local authors right now. We are building this calendar more around these kinds of events to promote local authors, local poets. And we've had quite a few poetry sessions, which have been wonderful. And we want to continue to build good company around the Lisbon community, not tourists, not seasonal guests, but rather the guests that live around us. That was always very, very important to us.
And Samuel, I must say, that's the impression I have as well, at least of Lisbon. Their customers are very discerning as well. It's a very cultured, very literary city as well. So if they are visiting good company, that means it's good, right?
Absolutely.
So I didn't actually ask you, Samuel, what was your experience actually with books growing up in the United States? Were you also quite similar to Giovanna in that sense that you always worked with books? You always had somehow that dream to have your own bookstore?
I had a little bit of a different entrance into this. I think growing up, I spent a lot of time in bookstores just because the US doesn't really have a lot of third spaces. So places like Barnes and Noble or Borders, right, would serve as the after school place. So I spent, I don't know how many years of my life sitting in the cafe and in the big bookstores, just working and reading, and that's where I spent my afternoons after school. So when I moved to Europe in 2013 for college, the bookstores here are quite a bit different, and I really fell in love with the small it's much more romantic here. I think it's cute corner bookstores with one person, as an individual bookseller who can actually talk to you one-on-one, and it's just a much more romantic sort of setup. And so as I went through my academic career, I'm now doing a PhD in literature here in Lisbon. I fell in love with literature, and of course the physical bookstore is a big part of that love. And so this idea of having a bookstore has been something that we've been talking about for years now. And it was the perfect time, I think, to make it happen, as Giovanna described. So in my role in Good Company is a lot of the day-to-day running of the space, and then the coffee and wine, the bar really is my half of the business.
An important half, I would
yes,
say.
extremely important.
Especially Portugal and wine. I think that's always a good idea.
Yeah, and we only have Portuguese wines. We were very, very adamant about that. We serve local coffee and local wines. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I don't want to put you guys in the spot, but I will put you guys in the spot. If I go there to Good Company with a glass of wine, I wonder if you could give me perhaps one recommendation of a book you have in the shop. That's a difficult one. That's a very difficult one. Do you sell magazines as well? Is it mainly books?
No, we don't sell magazines at the moment. We are only selling books. We did have a partnership with a local magazine that is also a publisher called Fita, Friends in the Arts.
Amazing.
They do one publication a year. It's a very wonderful, very thick. It looks like a book, basically. But we are trying to expand to magazines. We certainly have Monocle books in there.
Thank you very much, Giovanna Centeno and Samuel Miller from Good Company Bookshop in Lisbon. For more information about them, go to goodcompanyBooks.com. And Monocle's May issue is also out now, including the article by Gaia Lutz about Good Company Bookshop. I also had the pleasure to visit Climax Books in London. In fact, they have a store in New York too. Climax was established by Isabella Burley, former editor-in-chief of Dazed and Confused and former chief marketing officer of Acne Studios. Climax explores the pleasures of print, publishing and objects, and sells rare books and ephemera, and a beautiful selection of their very own t-shirts and bags too. This is my conversation with Isabella.
My first big job, I guess, was working on the shop floor at Dover Street Market when I was 17. So I think I've always loved being on the shop floor. And before that, when I was 16, I worked at American Apparel. But I think my love for books and ephemera and magazines, really started being a teenager growing up in London. And I just remember spending so many nights at the Borders on Charing Cross Road. I think that was just the way to understand fashion at that time, and it felt like it was this whole world that you were exploring and understanding. So I think it really started from a young age, and my dad's a really avid reader, so I grew up in a house where it's to even get up the stairs there'd be books all over the place. So I think it's always been a kind of interest.
But I think a shop like yours, Climax, I think people are really needing places like this, because if you go to a normal bookstore, you might see the usual bestsellers, but I think there's such a curation here of things that are really hard to find. I had a little browse here. They're quite unique. What does a book need to have to be here in your shop?
It's really hard to explain because I think it's really instinctual to me and also Olivia and Joseph who work with me. But I think all of the kind of material that we have demands something of people, and not that it's always confrontational, but I think there's this kind of sense of it demanding something from a viewer. And I love the idea that we have, something that feels really contemporary, like a Martine Sims book that we just published that's almost 600 pages. And then we have older Mariko Mori books or Nina Gawamika. Really, I guess, kind of celebrating artists that we feel have this kind of uncompromising spirit, but that, changes all the time. And I think almost what Climax is to me is this kind of intersection of that material and this idea that there's no other place where all of these things are in the same room or the same website and they somehow make sense. Yeah, exactly. Hard to find and kind of maybe also a lot of forgotten artists or artists that maybe haven't had the kind of recognition within their career that they deserve. So I think there's also such an educational element of what we do in terms of wanting to highlight these kind of image makers in some way.
And who are your customers? Are they necessarily in the creative industry, or do you have sometimes a very random customer who perhaps is a lawyer or something like that?
We have a few lawyers, I'm sure. But I think in general, I think it's a lot of creative people. And I think people come to Climax to be kind of inspired, to discover something new. And it's really amazing for me when we have photographers or art directors or designers come in and they're looking for inspiration for a new collection or project, and they come to us and they really look through the shelves and they maybe find something that or influence the next 10 years of their life or the next kind of like wave of collections. So I think, yeah, we have a really big creative community also of artists as well. So I think that's something I really treasure.
And I want to know more about Climax. Of course, you started here in London, but now I know you also have a shop in New York, which is amazing.
Yeah.
How do you divide the time between both of them?
We only opened New York in September, and I think it's been such a game changer in the sense of, I think it's widened our audience, and I think the New York store is like such a full kind of vision of Climax in terms of all of the design details. It has our full kind of wearable offering, so like our latex bags or our t-shirts or our Chipova-Luena collaboration. So I think the New York store really symbolizes like the world of Climax that's been in my head for a really long time. And I think it's the first time that you're able to really understand like the world and the kind of scope and the feeling that I think we want to have when people come into the store. But the website has existed since 2020 when I founded Climax. And I think we spent so much time getting the design right and kind of having this world where there would be such kind of joy in like seeing all of these different objects together and these kind of like references from the past and contemporary things and things that have been forgotten or overlooked. So I think in a way it's like we started a visual language with the branding and the website in 2020, and then New York just feels like a kind of, yeah, like this kind of bigger environment that people can really understand what Climax is and get a feeling when they come into the space.
And we have to mention as well in terms of the branding, which is very special from Climax, you also worked at Acne Studios as well. So you do have a lot of experience with fashion as well. Right?
Yeah, most of my career was in publishing, as I was the editor-in-chief of Dazed, and then I was the chief marketing officer at Acne Studios. So I think this kind of intersection of fashion and publishing and kind of design and communication has always been kind of what I've done as a main job.
One thing I'm curious as well, I mean, looking at this very charming shop in Warder Mills, you talk about the merch, you know, the caps, the t-shirt. I think there's something quite special about it. I think do you think you attract perhaps a younger audience as well? That's kind of a way to get into the books and the magazines.
Yeah, I think we have like a really young audience, but also like a lot of older customers and established kind of customers who shop from us. But I think I basically waited 4 years to release any kind of merch because I felt like bookstore merch felt really kind of generic, and like the production quality was never high. It was never really like thoughtful enough. And I think with my background in fashion, I really wanted to wait and do it right. So yeah, a big part of that was this kind of collaboration that we did with Chipova-Luena, which came out in September, and I've been big fans of their works and they're friends of mine. And I think that really kind of epitomized this sense of like Climax as a bookstore being able to collaborate with fashion brands on like really thoughtful pieces. And then we kind of have our own line of wearables. And I prefer the term wearables to merch because I think merch feels quite like throwaway or ephemeral. And I think this idea of like wearables speaks to your point of like people come in and they want to be part of the world of Climax and they want to kind of signify that they have this kind of cultural curiosity. So I love that term wearables. But again, even with the kind of wearables that we design in-house, we still want to be really thoughtful and kind of push the boundaries of what bookstore merch could be. So instead of having a canvas tote bag, we have a bag made out of latex because the latex is
iconic, right?
Yeah. But latex is also like a big feature in the New York store. So it's like kind of like finding these connections. And then with everything else, like all of our product is 100% organic cotton. We make it in Portugal. And it just has that same level of quality that you would expect from like other kind of fashion designers. So I think we want to make sure we always have that detail on what we do.
Absolutely. What about in terms of research for these amazing products? And I want to mention, I think there was a book, The Syrian Guide for Lingerie, something like that. It was so special. I never came across that. But I think that's why people should actually come and visit. Because sometimes you see something you've never seen it before. Do you go to different countries? I know I'm sure you like Japan very much here, right?
Love Japan. Yeah, it's really a combination of doing kind of very focused like buying trips like multiple times a year. We get a source a lot from Japan because I think there's just such amazing book culture there. But then it's also still finding things in like thrift shops in the the US or in London, I think there's still great secondhand bookstores here where you can kind of discover something. But then I think I'm also like such a kind of like obsessive researcher that I think it's spending a lot of hours late at night online and kind of discovering stuff and finding all of these kind of books that I'm also like not familiar with and that I feel really excited to share and to kind of like have in the store.
And I want to ask you about the shop in London. There's some exciting news ahead. I know you're moving.
Yeah, I mean, we love this
place.
space. I know, it's funny because it's like in the winter it's really bleak, but as soon as it's got like slightly warmer, it's so like...
It's coming through the windows
I know,
right now.
It's like so charming. We've been in this space almost 2 years and it's kind of been open to the public like a year and a half. But I think now that we have a kind of storefront, street level space in New York, I think we want to match that kind of energy in London and have a kind of thoughtfulness in how we approach the design of the space. So we're going to be moving out of this space and taking like a bigger storefront space in London. Not sure where yet, but it'll get figured out.
We'll keep an eye to that.
Exactly.
And Isabella, I'm curious because of course we're a show about magazines as well.
Of course.
Which magazines do you read? I know you were the editor-in-chief of Days, but is there any titles you read now, or perhaps you like to look back at the older ones as well that you find in your research?
I've actually got really obsessed with Nest magazine. I have a whole stack behind this. I'll show you after. But it was basically like an interiors magazine that ran from the kind of late 90s to early 2000s. But the format was always so playful. Like there would be like a lollipop stick on the cover or a magnet, or it would have these crazy cutouts, like the production level, like they must have been hemorrhaging money, which I'm sure is why it stopped. But it was this idea of kind of challenging an interiors magazine space, which I think at that time was probably quite classical, wall of interiors, etc., and being really playful. And the commissioning was so smart, where it would be like Nan Goldin shooting Louise Bourgeois in her home and like have this real kind of like punchiness and attitude. So I feel like I've been looking back a lot at old copies of Nest.
Thank you, Isabella. And you can find out more about Climax on climaxbooks.com. And now, always great to welcome back Christoph Amend, editorial director for Zeit, publishers, of course, of Die Zeit, Germany's most celebrated weekly newspaper, and other magazines as well. This time we talk about Zeit Kunst, a new supplement in the newspaper that is out now exclusively on the newsstands until Wednesday next week. It is an ambitious, large-format product featuring new work and photography from the likes of Tyler Mitchell and Yayoi Kusama. Here is Christoph with more.
I think we live in a media world today where nothing is stable and you have to keep moving. You have to keep telling new stories when it comes to journalism, but also when it comes to new products, and sometimes surprise the readers, the listeners, but also to keep up the good faith. And I think that's very important, to show what every medium can do. You know, with Zeit Kunst, we're trying to celebrate the party of print. We're doing this in 2025, where our world has become so digitalized for all good reasons. But, you know, on the other hand, I think it's also sometimes great to take a different view on what we have. And I think, you know, to have a great weekly paper like Die Zeit with its fantastic, great format, I was thinking about how can we celebrate the quality of paper and the quality of the journalism that we publish. And so we came up with this little project called Zeit Kunst.
Well, before you tell us a bit more about Zeit Kunst, I mean, you have to tell me about the impressive numbers of the print edition of Die Zeit. I mean, because of course, Zeit Kunst is going to come with the newspaper. I wonder, give us an update. I mean, you surprised me already last time we spoke, but I think the numbers are still very high.
Yeah, they keep rising, surprisingly maybe, but also, you know, it makes all of us very happy. Die Zeit is now selling 630,000 copies every week. We already passed 500,000 subscribers in the early weeks of this year, which is maybe an even more important number, you know, to have over 500,000 people who subscribe to Die Zeit, either on print or digital, to, you know, just follow up what we do in journalism. And I think it's great news for all of us.
Well, time for the introduction. So if you are, in Germany or anywhere in the world and grab the latest edition of the Zeit, you'll be able to see the beautiful Zeit Kunst, which you just showed me just now. Give us a little bit about what is it actually?
Well, I started thinking about the project, I think, nearly 2 years ago. So it started off with a sort of an observation that, of course, because we're pushing our digital subscription model, as everyone does these days, people sometimes could forget this beautiful weekly paper that it's so beautifully designed, featuring so many great illustrations and photography, but of course also the stories themselves. So I was thinking, how can we celebrate this weekly product, the weekly paper? And of course, you start off with journalism, and then I thought, well, if you read a long exclusive story, it doesn't really matter if you read it on your smartphone or on print or on any device, really. But maybe it's different with the visual side of it, with photographs and illustrations, because with the big newspaper format, you can celebrate, a piece of art in a different way. And especially in times where we all have come used to, basically looking at our smartphones, I don't know, how many hours a day, maybe too many. I think even sort of the big newspaper format is even more surprising in a way. So I thought, well, why don't we work with the visual side of journalism? And the next idea was, why don't we work with art? And so we came up with this idea of asking fantastic, in many cases, very famous artists to join us for this project. So each issue of Zeit Kunst will have one motto, one question. The first issue, the motto is, Das bin ich auch, that's also me, or that's the other side of me. And we asked artists like Renike Dijkstra, Tyler Mitchell, and Kusama
the top names
to join us.
You're going really aiming high.
Well, trying to. And the idea is that the artists answer with a piece of work they've either just done, or they're doing it for the issue, or they've done a long time ago, but nobody has seen it. Elizabeth Peyton, who sent us a beautiful portrait of the French philosopher Simone Weil, that was her answer. In every artwork that Elizabeth is doing, you can also see herself a bit. So you have like a mix of Simone Weil, the French philosopher, and herself also. And that's the artwork we chose for the cover. But one of the many moments we had during the last couple of months when we actually started editing and producing the issue was when the team of Kusama sent us an email with a painting she had done in 1952, a painting of a young girl screaming. And the amazing thing is that her polka dots, which she became famous for later in her life, are already there. And so, I was looking at my smartphone, I was opening the file, and I was looking at this rough photograph of that painting from 1952. And I thought, this is why we do journalism like this.
That's amazing. And the type of people and it's also a good attention. I think Zeit is very good with that. The attention you give to art and culture generally. I think it's more than your average newspaper. I think it's fair to say that, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the culture section is a very important and vital part of Die Zeit. And actually, Zeit Kunst is a collaboration with the culture section. The two culture editors, Laura Hertreiter and Andreas Lebert, and myself, we sort of collaborated on this project. And Zeit's art editor, Hanno Rauterberg, also joined the team. And so it was really sort of putting the knowledge of art coverage together for this project. I'm very happy about this collaboration.
Tell us about who's on your roster of magazines. Of course, the iconic Zeit magazine, your little baby there. You have one dedicated to men's style. Give us a little update on the roster now.
Well, there's so many magazines by Zeit also out there. I mean, you have the weekly paper, which is something of a funny phenomenon because it's actually a magazine, but in a newspaper format, right? And of course, the daily coverage at Zeit Online is very successful. And we have magazines for really every topic you're asking for. We have a crime magazine called Zeitverbrechen, which is very successful. We have a magazine for students and younger readers called Zeit Campus. We have a magazine for children called Zeit Leo. The Leo, of course, because we have two lines in the logo of Die Zeit. We have a magazine for history buffs called Zeitgeschichte, Zeit History. As you mentioned, Zeitmagazin Mann, the men's style issue that we're publishing as a newsstand, standalone, twice a year. And also Zeitmagazin Wochenmarkt, our food magazine. And so this is probably a good example. I mean, Zeitmagazin Wochenmarkt, the fresh weekly market that we have in Germany everywhere, started as a weekly column in the magazine. And it became so popular that we at some point thought, well, maybe we could turn this one weekly column written by Elisabeth Rether into a magazine. So we turned it into a magazine and then turned it into a part of Zeit Online. And now it's become a very successful part, the food section at Zeit Online. So sometimes it starts with a small idea and it turns into something bigger.
It's funny you mentioned food there. One place next time I'm in Berlin, I would love to visit the Zeit Cafe as well. Tell us a bit more as well, because again, it's the sense of being there, connecting with people that perhaps like the Zeit brand in a way.
Oh, absolutely. I think, Monocle is one of the best examples in the media world. I mean, I think you have to create places, in this case, literally places where you can meet the readers and the readers can meet, what you do. And there's already a Zeit Cafe in Hamburg, part of the building where Zeit was founded in 1946. Last year, Judin Gallery here in Berlin came up with this idea. They said, we want to work on the area that we own in the middle of Berlin, in Berlin-Schöneberg. They already have a cafe. It's one of my favorite spots in Berlin. It's really a gem. You would never expect a beautiful little garden with a small pond and Japanese fishes swimming around, based on an old petrol station, a gas station that's, I think, a building from the 1950s. So they got in touch with us and asked us, if we would be interested in a collaboration. So we said, yeah, why don't we try this? And now we're opening Zeit Cafe in the first week of May during gallery weekend over here. And there's going to be art exhibitions, galleries, and also Zeit Cafe in the middle of it. And yeah, I think it's a nice way of being present in a very physical way.
I agree. I've seen the pictures. It looks amazing. And another thing about you, Christoph, of course, I'm a daily reader of your newsletter as well.
Oh, are you?
And I think it's what I like about it, of course, from Zeit, a respected newspaper, but there's something quite personable about it as well. And I think that's kind of the trick. That's why you have so many fans. You're very in tune with pop culture. I love that.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it has turned into this daily thing of mine. I mean, we started the newsletter, I think, in 2017, and it was one of the, those smaller projects that, we just talked about. Yeah, it became quite popular. And well, today I actually, I start my everyday work really with the newsletter. I mean, we have our first virtual meeting at around 8:30 in the morning. There's always one person from the team working with me on the daily issue. And then I start writing. And the great thing about it is, I'm happy you're mentioning it has sort of a mix of trying to sum up what happened in the news that day, but also to give you some inspiration about, a new Netflix show or a new song that was published. I mean, today I wrote about this new song that Alison Goldfrapp has recorded with the musician and DJ Tino Piontek from Dresden. Of course, people know him under his artist name, Purple Disco Machine. And so,
of course,
you have a mix of writing about, of course, the Pope who died on Monday and reflecting about who this guy was and what he stood for, but also then coming up with a new song by Alison Goldfrapp. And to put that into a daily mix, it's probably sort of a magazine-y idea, and it's not your everyday political newsletter, although it also covers politics. But I'm trying to, give you an idea what happened that day, but also, to give some inspiration. So we call it Was für ein Tag, what a day.
Thank you, Christoph Ammann, as ever. You can grab a copy of your Die Zeit in the newsstands now and go to zeit.de for more information. And finally on the show, on a sunny Tuesday afternoon in London, I paid a visit to a beautiful new bookstore in Camberwell that also sells magazines. Found by Danielle Moylan, the store has a lovely curated selection of books and good coffee too. She tells me a bit more about the story behind Lala Books.
So it used to be a bakery coffee shop. I had that for almost 3 years, and it's a very small space we're in. It's only 30 square meters, and I sort of realized after a time that it was too small for a food business, particularly given that we were growing and growing. And I spent a lot of time here thinking about what the area needed, and I got to know a lot of people in Camberwell, of course. When you're in a coffee shop 6 days a week, you get to know the area very well. And I just really thought that a bookshop was missing in the area. There's not been one in Camberwell for many years. At one point, there was 3 bookshops alone on one street in Camberwell. So I think that to bring one back, I did think it would be a good idea. So after I shut the place down and renovated for 6 months, we reopened just 3 weeks ago as Lala Books. And yeah, it's been going great so far.
That's amazing. And I have to tell our listeners, this is a Tuesday afternoon in London, a sunny day. It's packed. There are people outside having their coffee, people browsing the books. That's quite exciting. So clearly it's been a success so far.
Yeah, I've been really blown away by how many people have come and how many people have been getting their coffee, but also buying books and magazines and small zines and just really engaged with what we're offering. It's been really exciting to see so many people browsing in the store and picking things up to take home.
And a shout out for the magazines, because not all bookstores sell magazines. I think that's really important. You have a nice selection.
Yeah, it felt to me as one of the risks almost actually of opening up, that I wasn't sure if people would buy magazines here just by observing other bookshops around it. And I mean, also newsstands, there's not a lot in sort of residential areas. We're primarily a residential area. And in fact, from here, you'd probably have to go to maybe Brixton or into the city to buy magazines. So I just went in with the idea, we'll just see how it goes. And I built the magazine shelves, and it's been great too. We've been selling out of magazines, having to get restocks. And again, people have been buying really widely from what we've offered them.
You do have the Demi Moore cover of W magazine, so I will be getting that one.
Great.
What about publishing? Do you have any connection with publishing? I know you had a deli here before, but I wonder if you had any other experiences in the world of magazines or books before this bookstore.
I mean, not really. I was for a short amount of time a writer and a journalist. That's quite a few years ago. But
you wrote for Monocle once?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I worked for Monocle 2 or 3 times, and it's when I was a freelance journalist. But really, going into this, I had no real connections. I didn't really know many people in the industry, but I think when it comes to independent bookshops this size, I think most of the people who do open them are just people who love books and love magazines and want to give it a go. So I'm just joining that group of people.
How are you finding the process of curation? Because looking here, there's a lot of kind of little notes saying, "Oh, this book has been nominated for a Booker Prize." I can see there is some level of care, of course, about the books.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a small shop this size will probably, it reflects my taste, as it should any small independent bookshop. I think will reflect the taste of the owner, particularly in the beginning. When I first ordered everything in, it took me a whole week of choosing, and when everything came in, I looked at it and I thought, who on earth is going to buy any of this? All of a sudden my choices seemed kind of odd, but it's really surprised me with what people have bought. They've really been buying a lot of philosophy, a lot of the sort of small pamphlets that we get in. They've been sort of buying a lot of the sort of unexpected things you might pick up. And over time, the selection will probably reflect more and more the people in the area and what people ask for. But so far, it seems to be working.
And there's something about a bookstore that, of course, you're catering for the locals, but it can become a thing. Like, I will actually leave my neighborhood and go to Camberwell to visit Lala Books. Right?
Yeah.
I think you're probably going to see this as well.
I hope so. That would be the dream, that we become a destination. Yeah, I mean that would be really exciting, and I hope that we can meet people's expectations.
I must ask about a specific book, 20 Years, which I believe your partner wrote. Are you stalking it?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think it would be...
I wonder if you can tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my husband is a great journalist, Sune Engel Rasmussen. He writes for the Wall Street Journal. And his second book, his first in English, it's called 20 Years. It reflects on his decade of reporting on Afghanistan and from our time in Afghanistan. And it's actually just received the award, the Overseas Press Club Award for Non-Fiction Book of the Year, which is a huge prize, a huge honour. And I can personally say that it is a truly excellent book. It's very humane. It really reads like a novel, even though it is a work of non-fiction.
What about the Delhi side? Of course, you had a very beloved Delhi here in Cambodia. Do you have some elements? I know you have some lovely coffee and tea, but are you thinking about adding some aspect of that? Or
in terms of food, no. I think that I would like to keep it simple. I think the one thing I can speak to is the element of hospitality. Is something that we are
it's
already
very
doing.
Cozy, yeah.
I think that's and I have a lot of the same staff from the Delhi. I think that's something that is, it's a great thing to walk into a bookshop and feel welcome and be engaged in a chat with the person behind the counter. Whether it be about the book or how your day is going. I think that's something that is, in a lot of ways, a community service and a great part of bringing the community together around a product, whether that be books or coffee or, in another life, pastries or...
Now a personal question. What do you read, actually, in terms of magazines, books? What the first thing that came to your mind when I asked you that?
The first thing that came to my mind was Hisham Mata.
Just behind you.
Yeah, just behind me. I read a lot of literary fiction. And what I've obviously read has evolved over the years. I started off, loving really classics. But fiction's always been a huge part of my life. I think that nothing can tell the truth the way that fiction really can. In terms of magazines, I really love reading a lot of the magazines dedicated to fiction, whether that be the short story in the New Yorker or any number of the great magazines out there. I think that since I've been researching magazines for my own shop, I really love some of the sort of the zines and the magazines that straddle between being a zine and a magazine. I think that they're really exciting. It's a really great way of getting an idea of where youth culture is, what's important to young people, what they're writing about, what they're thinking about, what they're satirizing. And I really love stocking some of those zines here as well.
And it's important that you are selling them physically as well, because I think there's something about books that is if everyone prefers to go to a shop. Of course, you can buy online. Yeah. But for example, I came here, saw Eurotrash, I was intrigued by the cover. Now I'm going to be thinking about it. There is something about it, right?
It's so and it's so gratifying to see people spend real time here, like to spend up to hours and hours. We deliberately around the shop have places where you can dig and rifle through, because we want to give people that opportunity to sit down and sort through something and maybe discover something that's new for them. And I think that people have been so responsive to the little spaces around the shop where we've just piled some books up or thrown some books in a box. People love going through them. It's people talk a lot about third spaces, and seeing the bookshop really act as a third space for people, somewhere where they're not under a rush to get in and get out. It's really understood that they can spend quite a lot of time here and go through things. I think that's so important today and something that people really want, because it's their opportunity to slow down, take things in slowly, really concentrate on just one thing at a time. It's been fantastic to see.
Thank you, Danielle. You can visit her Instagram page on lalabooks.london. And that's it for this week's show. My thanks as ever to our editor Jack Jewers. Any comments or queries, feel free to write to me, Fernando, at fpandmonaco.com. Remember, we're back next Saturday at 10 a.m. London time. Meanwhile, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever platform you may want to subscribe. You've been listening to The Stack. I'm Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.